Ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome to the Aspire for Excellence Foundation. It's 7:34. We are 4 minutes into our time. So we are going to start right now. But just before we start, we would like to take the bio of our speaker. So George, could you please read out the bio of our speakers? I have given the ground rules already. Okay? Thank you, George.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bode is a partner in UK-based consulting firm Inspired Concepts. He also sits on the board of Purple Source Consulting in Nigeria. He has over 30 years cognate and commercial experience and has held executive and management positions within the banking and finance industry in Nigeria and the consulting sector in the UK. He spent 10 years working in the Nigerian finance sector with brands such as First Bank, Sterling Bank, and the UBA Group. Bode is also a visiting lecturer at a number of universities in the UK where he teaches business management subjects. He has facilitated several group retreat and training programs for professionals and corporate organizations in the UK and across Africa. He has also led sessions for boards, senior management teams, marketing and sales teams, HR teams, and facilitated corporate retreats. He is a People Source Consulting Managing Partner and has worked with several global organizations, including Total Energies, Tetra Pak West Africa, IHS Towers, Sanofi, and Shell, and other multinational companies across Africa, Europe, and the USA. He is also the Master Partner for Management Drives International in Africa. Bode's work has given him extensive exposure to clients in Nigeria, South Africa, Ghana, Angola,
George, are you with us? I can't seem to hear you, George. Okay.
Including the DISC, Lencioni's SMT Tools, SHL, Belbin VAC, Management Drives, and the Bono 6 Thinking Hats. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you very much, George. So, Mr. Bode, you have the floor, please. You could share your slides and we can go ahead. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
You have 1 hour. Thank you.
Fantastic. Let me use my timer to make sure that I'm on course as well. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for coming, joining the meeting today. This is a home, this is a house, and I am the visitor coming in here. So first and foremost, thank you for having me join you today, and we hope we'll have a really worthwhile time together today. Today, we're going to be looking at the whole idea of leadership. But we're going to look at the idea of leadership more from the context of how we can have impact as a leader. How we can have impact as a leader. And there are a number of questions that I would want you to have at the back of your mind before I even start to share the slides. Of course, we will rehash a lot of them or refer to them as we go along over the day, over the next hour. The first is this. When I think about my self-leadership, what is the role of self-awareness, my self-awareness, being aware of myself? How much of an impact does it have on my ability to lead personally, to lead myself, and also to lead other people? The second question is, what are my personal values? What are the things that I consider very, very important for me as a person? And is there any way in which those things that I consider important for me have a connection with my capacity to lead? Obviously, if I consider something important for me, it will show in the way I conduct myself. And does that also in any way connect with the way I then lead other people? So that's the second question. The third question, what are my own personal areas of leadership strength? The fourth question, how can I influence other people to build relationships within whatever the sphere of influence that I have is, whether the sphere is my school environment, my classroom, whether the sphere is my community, whether the sphere is my neighborhood, our streets, whether the sphere is my office, the company I run or the one I work in, the team I'm in, the church body that I'm in, whatever the perimeter that I happen to have where I can engage with people, how do I influence them and build relationships that are impactful with them? And then finally, the fifth question, are there any strategies for maximizing my personal leadership? All these 5 questions we will try and answer through the deck of slides and the conversations that we will have as we go on. So let me share the deck of slides. Okay, let's see, and then I just go. Okay. If you could let me know if you can see the slides, that would be helpful.
We can see the slides now. I can see the slides now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I want to start with a number of quotes to frame the conversation that we're having. Before I go into the quotes, thank you so much, George, for that very eloquent introduction. I almost didn't recognize myself when you were reading the profile, but the truth is, yes, I do have a fair bit of experience working with the clients that you see on this slide, the top portion of the slide, and many others. But I'm a student of what I do, so there's a lot that I don't know. And on this time that we are together, I'm not coming in here as an expert who knows everything, but I'm coming in here as somebody who has learned quite a number of things and is willing to share them with everybody. And if we imagine that this was a room, a space where we can all live with something new, something we didn't know when we started, myself included, then it is what we put into this space that determines what we get out of it. I will lead the conversation. I will refer to management drives. That's it's a tool about self-awareness and other awareness, team effectiveness that we use with clients across the world. And my organization is the partner for Africa. I will also refer to DISC, which is a tool, again, that we use to certify people on here in all across Africa, particularly in West Africa. And I will refer to that when we get to the segment when we talk about really getting to understand our personality styles and those of other people. The other brands you see on there, PeopleSource, that's our business in Africa, based in Nigeria and Lagos, but we work with clients across the continent. And SHL, which is also a tool that is used to assess the ability for people to perform and the ability for them to be motivated to do the work that they do. The final bit of the slide at the bottom is about me as a person. What are the things that make me tick? So beyond work and all the white shirt and the suits, who is Bode behind all of that? So Bode is somebody who loves to travel, because I learn a lot as I engage with different cultures, learn a lot. I learn a lot more from my travels, and thank God my work allows me to do quite a bit of that. I learn a lot more from that than I probably even learned from reading books. Then I'm passionate about sport, particularly about football. I love the Nigerian Eagles. So you can know it's a bit of a love-hate relationship if you're a Nigerian on this kind of thinking about the Super Eagles. I think, when on earth are we going to get to our potential? When are we going to be able to lead ourselves to the place where we really should be? And we're still waiting for that moment to come. But the picture I have on there is the picture of our highest moment, I believe. And it's an interesting dynamic. What began to happen right after this moment when Rashidi Yekini was shaking that net and saying, I am the king of them all. It seemed everything went downwards after that. Why? We can talk about that, but that's not a topic for today. And then I love watching movies as well. The movie Inside Out, it's a cartoon movie, but it's a fantastic movie about the things we're going to be talking about today. So if anybody has the opportunity, I would recommend that you watch it. I believe this Inside Out 2 came out a few months back, but even if you were able to watch the old one, Inside Out 1, It will tell you a lot about what's driving us within us, what makes us who we are, and how we can begin to stay on top of those things rather than allow those things to shape everything that we're seeing as outcomes. So, simple rules. I love it when we're engaging. Like I said, this is a box. Let's fill it up with perspectives from everybody. So please feel free to use the chat box, throw in questions there, throw in your comments there, throw in your contributions there. This space is not just mine, it's our space for the next hour. Let's see what we can learn together, what we can co-create. So participation and interaction will be key. So let's start off with leadership. And like I said, I had a number of quotes that I wanted to share. The first is by this chap called Gerhard van Rosenberg. He's in South Africa, and he leads this organization called Future Leaders. And he says leadership is not about being a high performer. He's trying to challenge a lot of the paradigms that we have about what leadership is. He said it's beyond performance. It's not about being an expert. It's beyond expertise. It's not about climbing the success, the power, the status ladder. The person at the top of the ladder is the leader. It's beyond that. It's not about skills, the person who has the abilities, the greatest abilities. No, it's beyond that. It's not about knowledge, the person who knows so much, we can follow them. It's not about that. Leadership is actually an expression of your whole person. In other words, it includes the things that he has mentioned, but a lot more than that. It's about how you use your whole person to good effect in and through other people. What is Van Rosenberg really trying to say, or Gerhard really trying to say? He's trying to say that we embody leadership. Leadership is who we are, first and foremost, not what we do. It is who we are and what we do. It is who we are, and then we do out of who we are. There are a number of quotes that I had on my notes here. I'm just going to read them out to help frame our thinking as we continue on this conversation. The first one is this: what you do matters, but who you are matters more. What you do matters, but who you are matters more. If you look at the title of this talk, it's really about how we have impact from the inside out. It's about us being and then doing as a function of who we are. The second quote: you cannot give what you don't have. I'm sure we've all heard this before. You can only give what you have. Can't take anybody where you haven't been. And the third quote: the state you are in is the state you give to others. The state you are in is the state you give to others. I always like to, when people ask me what do I think leadership is really all about, I like this imagery of leadership being the capacity of a person to take others from here to there. Because it's a very simple description of what leadership is. Leadership is about transformation. Leadership is about movement and change, positive change from one state of situation to another. I've used a variety of imageries on this slide to depict that. It's about taking from somewhere to somewhere better. Now, here to there can be anything in any context. If you are a father with your son, being able to lead your son, your teenage son, effectively, it's about getting him to think in a way that is a more constructive way about the future that he's heading towards, perhaps. Or if you are a leader, a team leader, it's about getting the people who you are working with, your colleagues, getting them to see what you see and be inspired to want to achieve what you see is possible for the team. If you are a CEO, it's about getting the entire organization thinking and aligned in the same direction as what the vision that you have for the business, and feeling that they are capable, they are empowered to execute the strategy of the business to achieve the outcome. Moving from here to there is also being able to get people to see beyond the limitations that they would encounter in the course of trying to move. So leadership is about transformation. Leadership is about change. Leadership is about movement into a better situation, which also means that for me as a person, leadership is also about movement to a better place for me. it starts with me. Many times when I'm in sessions with managers and we want to talk about a lot of skills, the knowledge that is required, the temperament that is required, there's a lot, and we learn it from day to day. The way we show up as leaders, I always tell them, it first starts with you. Try and imagine, and I would encourage everyone to do exactly what I'm saying right now. Try and imagine that you had a piece of chalk in your hand right now, and that the floor that you are sitting on or standing on, assume you are standing, the floor you're standing on is not one that had a carpet or anything, but it's one that is maybe it has terrazzo or whatever on the floor, something you can write on. And you take that white chalk and you draw a circle around yourself so that you are actually standing inside that circle. That space that circle creates is a space that you own. You have total control over that space. You take ownership of that space and you realize that you are the project that needs to be transformed. You are the first thing that needs to be led. And it's not easy to lead ourselves. It starts with being aware of who we are. And then it moves on to being intentional about what we have come to realize. It's not just about being aware, but it's about accepting what we see with all honesty. And then say, okay, I see some things that are great and I want to harness them. I see some things that are not so great and I want to improve on them. I want to work through them. And then the journey starts. And then you begin to apply yourself to the transformation of yourself. What then happens is that as you go through this journey of self-discovery and you begin to apply yourself to it, it flows out to others around you, flows out to the team, flows out to your son, flows out to your daughter, flows out to the community. People pick it up. That's why I said at the beginning that it is something that you are, you embody it, you show up as a leader, and then everything else follows suit. But we'll talk about it in a lot more detail as we move on. So we started talking about self-leadership. Maybe one thing I should mention just before we continue on the trajectory of self-leadership that would help to crystallize the conversation we're having is that if you stop to think about it, leadership is both a number of processes, things you have to do. There's need for you, for instance, to have, if you are leading people, there's a need for clarity. There's a need for a route map. Where are we going? How are we going to get there? How have you even imagined that we will get there? Things might be different when we start the journey, but how have you imagined that we will get there? There is a need to do certain things to build trust, so people feel we're comfortable to follow you in the direction you're going. There is even the need for you to build trust with you. And I will talk about that as we go along. Internally, that you feel that you can trust yourself to move in a particular direction. And it's a journey. But we'll talk about that as we go along. So there are some processes. When you look at leadership, you can look at it from the viewpoint of a variety of processes that need to be fulfilled. But also, leadership is also a variety of behaviors that you show up with. Leadership is a lot has to do with temperance. A lot has to do with being in the moment. A lot has to do with the language of leadership. A lot has to do with the perspectives that you're sharing, etc. A lot has to do with challenging situations, challenging perspectives at the core or at the heart of those perspectives. Here we talk about self-leadership. And what is self-leadership? So we highlight the fact that great leadership it's a cultivated art. Something that is a cultivated art is not something that happens just like that. You develop it. You keep working at it. You are tenacious about it. You keep thinking about it. Things happen and you stop and you process what has happened. And you come to conclusions about it that then helps you to be better in the next iteration that you go on. So, because you are the center of leadership, everything revolves around you as a person. We talk a lot, I know in Nigeria and in all contexts of the world, that everything rises and falls on leadership. But it starts with you. In that perimeter that you've drawn earlier on, you are the project. The more you change, the more you grow, the more you embody the right kind of leadership, the more the environment is aligned to it. And we'll talk a bit more about the science around that as well. One of the major reasons why it is so important that we have self-leadership in the context that we live in today is because, and I know for many of us who probably have heard this acronym before, for some of us we may not, it's because we live in such a VUCA world at the moment. What does VUCA mean? It's just an acronym that highlights the sort of overarching themes that we see in the world today, what we would call the new normal in the world today. And it had been happening before the pandemic, but the pandemic took it to another level. It is a world where there's a lot of volatility. What is volatility? Things are happening. We don't really know what might happen next. Anything can happen at any time. You know, think about in the last 6 months where we were, even with peace in the world, and where we are now. 6 months ago, the Israel issue was not, I don't think it was in there. No, it was. It just started, it was a year. It was a year recently. So in the last year, the Israel issue, but that Israel issue has now catapulted into something that we're now hoping that a war doesn't happen over the last 6 months. Before that, it was the issue in Ukraine, which was not there some years before. Many things just seem to happen out of the blue. I'm using a global example, but you can look even at our local context and think about so many things that just seem to happen now. Also, the environment is a very uncertain one. You don't really have control over what to expect or what you know. There's so many variables. It is also a pretty complex world. The more development we have in the world, the more technology is driving things, the more globalization is driving things, the more complex the challenges that we have to face to maintain society is. Even the culture that is now, because we're now in a global world, it's hard to even maintain our own indigenous cultures as we think about everything is filtering across the world. The whole world is sort of like assimilating information from the same sources, and it's always about challenging different paradigms on a constant basis. And then there's a lot of ambiguity. What is ambiguity? Nothing is actually, you don't have enough information about anything. Sometimes they say the more you know, the less you know. I think that is a good classic example of the world that we live in right now. We have so much knowledge out there, but we actually don't have wisdom concerning a lot of things. So in this kind of context, what we have is a requirement for resilience for us as individuals, as we cope with all those things. Lots of changes happening, that's constant. Turbulence is a normal thing. A lot of untested ideas. I mentioned about the internet. I mentioned about social media. If you think about it, there's so many. You go on there, even the paradigms of different societies coming into our society and telling us that those paradigms are the right things. But let's even forget about the social constructs that have been challenged. Even what is true, what is right, what is helpful, what is healthy, we don't know. Today, you hear this drug is really helpful for X. Everybody starts to take it. They think it's working for them. Then in 2 years' time, they say, sorry, that drug has a contraindication. You know, in other words, it has a problem that it will create, a problem that is worse than the one you are trying to solve. And that you are being told 2 years after, and life continues. So you in this kind of reality, there's a lot of untested wisdom, in quotes, that is coming out into the world because the doors of our minds are open to so many things that they weren't before in this new context. The work is relentless. We talk about hybrid work, but what does hybrid work actually mean for the person who's working? It means that they can reach you now at home. It means that you have your laptop at home as well. After dinner, you're tempted to go and open it up and try and finish off some things that you did not finish between 9 and 5 o'clock. When you were going into the office every day, you would finish what you can. The worst that can happen is that you will wait in the office. By 6 o'clock, you'll be thinking, the traffic is going to get too much. I have to go. I will continue tomorrow. Now you are at home. The work is coming to you. So it means work is relentless. I've just used that simple example. But a 24/7 world, open for business 24/7, has certain realities for us as individuals. Stress being one of them. And of course, we all know that life is really very precious for us. So, if we transition from our thinking about the impact of the environment on us as individuals, and we begin to think, how do we cope in this kind of environment? it is extremely important to highlight how what we believe, what our thinking is anchored on, is crucial. Now, for me, I'm a man of faith. It means that a lot of my beliefs, if all my beliefs, stem from the scripture. I'm a Christian, so it stems from the Bible. And so I look at the Bible for direction. I look at the Bible for truth. I look at the Bible for clarity. When all that data is coming from everywhere, I test it with what I believe in the Bible. And I make those my beliefs. When I encounter new things, I go back to the Bible and say, how does this align with the Bible? It is important. If you're not a Christian, it is important that you have some sort of anchor that is unfailing, not your own perception of things, because we only see in parts. There's a lady called Anais Nin, I think she's French, who came up with this quotation. I use it all the time. And the lady says, and it's so true, that we see the world not as it is, but we see it as we are. In other words, our perspectives are colored by the goggles that we wear, our own experiences, our own what we've experienced in life, what we've been taught from childhood, the cultures we've grown up in. There is a world bigger than that. There are other angles, other ways of looking at issues that makes our own way as true as our own way is to us. It makes our own way a very narrow way of looking at things. So there is no fundamental truth that can come from us because we are limited. That's why we need an anchor that is beyond our own capacity to grasp things. And for me, that is the mind of God. And so the mind of God becomes my anchor. You need some sort of anchor. But the point I'm trying to make here is this. Those beliefs, those deep set beliefs, then drive what we value. So what I consider important to me is a function of my own anchors, my beliefs. What will happen is that those values, they become core to me as a person, and they determine what I choose and what I choose not to do, what I choose to do and what I choose not to do. We're now moving, as you can see on the right-hand side of this slide, from what is the cause to what is the impact. My choices invariably influences my behavior, the way I show up. Now, at the level of my behavior, that's the level that you and I, or you, if we were in the same room physically, that's what you see. You see Bode's behavior in certain contexts. And then maybe you might guess what his choices are. You may be able to hazard what his values are. You're unlikely to know exactly what I believe, but you may get a sense. But the thing is, for me, it is congruent. It is aligned for me to be clear on what my beliefs are, what my values are, realizing that they lead to my choices, they invariably determine how I behave, and that the outcomes that I see in my life every day are a function of that behavior. It is at the level of the outcomes that I can impact anybody. It is at the level of the outcomes that I can engage with people and have an influence over them. If I am not conscious of this ladder, I am just showing up without intention. That is a dangerous place to be. So it's very important that I'm clear on what my personal values are as a leader, because that's what will reverberate. That's what will show in my journey with others around me, even in my own journey with myself. So let's talk about my journey with myself for a few moments. Let's talk about purpose. I've said on this slide that the purpose of a thing, or the purpose, is the reason for which something is done or created, or for which something exists. Without a sense of personal purpose, we have no real direction, no sense of urgency to get anything done, no aspiration to achieve anything, and we won't really achieve much. We will most likely live well below our potential. I always like to say, when I'm interacting with colleagues in different contexts, even in wherever we are in Lagos or all over the world, I always like to say that what is the motivation for excellence when average is acceptable? If we look at some societies, we see that average is acceptable. Nobody is asking for much from our leaders. Nobody is asking for much from themselves. We're just waking up every day and we're trying to live the best way we can and we go to bed, wake up the next day, live the best way we can, and go to bed. Nobody's saying this can be better. This can be more, things can be more excellent than this. And I am ready to take responsibility for making that happen in my own little sphere. Why is that? Because there's nothing driving us from within. The only motivation for excellence where everybody's accepting average is from within me. We talk about, and I think the speaker from the last session last month might have mentioned Lee Kuan Yew. He mentioned a number of really interesting examples of leaders who transformed their society or led the journey of transformation in their environments. And when we look at each of these leaders, what we find is that there was something from within them, the spirit within them, the desire was from within them. And then they were able to find others and bring them alongside, share their vision with them, make it stick, and then they began to run together. It starts from within you. The likelihood of a lack of focus and momentum is extremely high when we don't have a personal purpose. So my question to you will be this: do you have a personal purpose? What is your purpose? Why are you here as a person? Why are you here as a person? Again, I'm a man of faith. The scriptures tell me in the Bible that God is the one who gives us clarity about why we are here and what we're living for. If you are a Christian, that is a journey you need to go on. Ask God. Go into the Bible. Find out, why am I here and what am I living for? What is my own unique role here on this earth? I've put some images on this slide to depict some possibilities in terms of purpose. The one to the top left-hand corner is the image of someone pulling another into the direction of success. Is that what your purpose is? Are you there to empower, to enable, to encourage others, and to help them get to their own destination? And in so doing, you get fulfillment. Or is it the image at the top right-hand corner, where you have some measure of knowledge, some measure of insight, some measure of understanding, and you are there to guide others, to give them illumination, to help them to see what they can't see, the perspectives that they can't see, and by so doing, helping them to achieve their own outcomes, and you getting fulfilled? Is that your purpose? Or is it to actually be very hands-on, take on the task, and show people how it's done? In each of these examples, one thing that I want to highlight is that you find your purpose in service to others. No man is created as an island to come, find a purpose that only fulfills himself and does it only for himself and is focused on himself. The world is out there with lots of problems to solve, many needs. What you need to do is to find what is your own unique DNA and say, okay, within this unique DNA, I have the capacity to find a solution to this need. That need is sitting in other people. And then as I go and I find that solution, other people are influenced by it and they can get to their own outcomes. But also, there's a benefit that comes to it for me. One, I get fulfilled because it's what I'm designed to do and I'm clear about my purpose. But also, two, I also get rewarded because obviously if I create a business or I create an idea or I innovate on something new, people are ready to exchange value for that idea or business or product because it offers value to them. So I think we've said enough about the whole idea of our thoughts, our thought life being very important as a leader, our thoughts leading to actions depicting habits that we live out every day, and character being something that people then perceive of us. People see us in the light of the things that we do on a day-to-day basis. Our character is etched into us. It becomes who we are. It becomes our brand, so to say. It becomes what people perceive of us, what they think about us. And it ultimately shapes the outcomes that we have over the long term in our lives, which we've referred to here as our destiny. So our thoughts shape our destinies. You can't walk away from the way you are thinking. I was in a session with a group of leaders in Johannesburg about 2 weeks ago. I remember one of the ladies in the room said, I need to start to think about what I'm thinking. And I said, that is a good place to start. And for many of us, we just think about something. We're not stopping to say, where is this thought coming from? What is the direction of this thought? What is the outcome of this thought on me and my capacity to do things? It is important that we are conscious of our thought life. But we'll talk a bit more about that when we look at how the brain works. I said earlier on that I love football, so I can't run away from sport and football. Let's talk very quickly about habits a bit more. We talked about how habits shape the character that people perceive of us, but also we can work on habits. We can use habits to work things for us. I like Cristiano Ronaldo. In my opinion, he's a great footballer, but he's not the greatest. But is he the most tenacious? Is he the one that I see who has taken what God has given him and used it so well that today he's still playing in the top flights? How many years on? That's what I see. And I see in him someone who epitomizes what we're highlighting here, that habits frame the foundations for a lasting success and growth. There is knowledge that you need to continue to develop. An attitude, the right attitude. Without the right attitude, you cannot sustain success. And skills that you need to continue to learn. You remember when we got on this call, first thing I said was this: I am a student of what I am doing. The day I become a master of what I am doing, everything flattens out. I continue to be a student of what I'm doing. Learning more, developing more skills, having more knowledge, and also having the right attitude, an attitude of curiosity, an attitude of openness that allows me to continue to embrace new perspectives, even though I may not understand them at first. Again, I know some other people would say the greatest of all is Messi, etc. The jury is out on that one. We'll continue that conversation, but let's stick with leadership and the elements that I think build us up inside out as leaders. So, personal responsibility is very important. Here, I share the personal responsibility triangle. We're talking here about being personally responsible. And when I talked earlier on about making a change, deciding that something has to move, when I talked earlier on about what is the motivation to be excellent when average is acceptable, I was talking about someone taking personal responsibility. You are not a leader when you don't take personal responsibility. So first you lead yourself and you choose to shape the environment around you. And that's how you first begin to show that it's not a position given to you, no. It is your mindset about how things need to align with the picture that you see as a person. And then personal leadership is about you taking hold of yourself and saying, I am going to rule myself. I am going to rule my appetites. I'm going to rule my desires. I'm going to shape how I act, how I show up. I know I have emotions. I know I feel in certain ways. I know there are biases, but I am not going to allow them to shape how I show up. I am going to be intentional about how I show up. And then I need to have a place that I'm going to. What's my personal vision? My personal vision needs to be aligned to my personal purpose. So find that purpose and the vision will be much clearer. There are also a couple of laws that guides personal responsibility. What I would say a cause into impact or cause to effect link. There is obviously the cause to effect. Whatever we do has an outcome. So, like Stephen Covey would say, always begin with the end in mind. This is my decision. And don't think about that in the form of big things. The way I respond to someone, the way I relate with my wife, the way I relate with my son, the way I relate with my team. If somebody raises their voice at me in a team meeting, I am the leader in that team. If I decide to clamp down on them and show them I am boss, I have made a decision that is really more aligned to me. There are other ways I could deal with that situation without blindsiding them, taking them aside, protecting their dignity, but addressing the issue, making sure it is addressed even in the group, but not by stamping down on them to show myself as the boss. When I do that, the only person I gratify is myself. But I have done this service to the journey of the team as a whole. And I have shown an example that others will replicate as well. So there is always an effect, an outcome for every cause. And we need to choose the end from the beginning. And that's the wisdom in that. Also, what we believe ultimately becomes what we experience. We'll talk about that in a while. Also, what we expect is ultimately what we will get. We'll talk about that in a while. And it's actually wired into our brains. We'll talk about that. And of course, we attract things as well. The law of attraction. What we are is also what we attract. What we are is what we attract. We'll talk about them all in a bit more detail as we go along. So finishing off this whole section around us fulfilling our destinies as individuals and being able to lead ourselves effectively. We've talked about our thinking. Make sure you're thinking about what you're thinking and make sure you're steering it in the right direction. We've talked about our habits. Make sure you decide what are the things that I'm going to be doing every day. What are the things that are going to shape my life? What are the routines that I'm going to have that will then become second nature to me, but that will become anchors on which a successful life is built? What are the things? Then think about your words. What am I saying? Words have life. You speak it out, it has an impact on people. You speak the right things out, it has an impact on people. I've heard this statement made. I think it was John Maxwell who mentioned it. He said, as a leader, people may not remember what you did. People may not remember what you said, but people will definitely remember how it made them feel. Words convey emotions. This is not the platform to go into the detail, but even as I speak words, the first place that it lands on you is in your emotions before your thoughts. For most people, we can talk about that again in a different context. Then we also need to think about our alignments, our associations, and we also need to think about who we are giving space to influence us. Who are we giving space to guide us? Who are our guiding lights? So the associations we interact with and the mentors also have an impact on where we end up in our journeys in life, but also as leaders, how we're doing as leaders. One last concept before we continue on this journey is the whole concept of resonance. This is so important. It's important because it has a high impact on our momentum as individuals to achieve things. Every aspect, we have one life. We know we have different aspects. We show up in different ways. I show up at work. I show up as a father at home. I show up as a leader in the community. I show up, if we have a landlord's, whatever in my street, I show up as one of the landlords in the area, or I show up as one of the tenants in the area, or etc. So I show up in many different contexts. I show up in my group of friends, my peers, I don't know, in a Rotary or whatever. So I show up in many different contexts. But there's a need for alignment in all of these contexts, particularly in my personal life, the things that I do in my personal life and what I am doing in my vocational life in the work. So your personal vision and ideals have to be aligned with the vision of the things that you're doing. It might be your job or whatever. So when you have that alignment, you don't get to work and you feel like you're doing the job for someone else. No, you're doing it for yourself. Because you can see the benefit for you on this journey in life. Even if you're working in a global organization or you're working in a local organization or you are running your own business, you see the resonance. It resonates for you. So everything is one. That is so important. You need to find that alignment. That is a journey that you need to go on so that it avoids you getting into a place where you're lethargic. You're really struggling to try and give your all to something, because you don't believe that it is taking you in the direction that you are meant to be going. It's very important that you have work-life resonance. So on the journey of being a self-aware leader, having a personal identity is very important. One needs to be able to show up in an authentic way. We'll talk about some internal details in a moment, but let's even look at what people experience, what people encounter. When people meet with us, they have an impression of us. I know it is unfair that people judge us by the first impressions that they have of us, but that is the reality of life. The reality of life is that we're constantly moving from what is implicit in our minds to what is explicit, if we're doing it well. We're constantly saying, I've just met this person. You guys have just met Bode, and you're thinking, okay, Bode is an interesting person. What do I know about him? The perceptions, if we have 30 people in this group right now, your perceptions will be different one to another, but it will mean something to you. It helps you to engage with me, to say, okay, at least this much I know about Bode, I think I can engage with him more from that point. Now, if we then had an opportunity for you to meet me in person, you would then be getting more data as I'm interacting with you to try and really profile me so that you can relate with me better. I will be doing exactly the same thing. What have I just described? I have described assumptions. That's what I've just described. So we all function by assumptions. We all function by first impressions. It's just the way we're wired, because there's so much data out there. We need to engage with people and build our rapport with them. So we start from a place of assumption. The problem, because I've heard that statement, and for many years I have believed it, that an assumption makes an ass of you and me. It sounds really nice, but I'm not sure it's exactly true. I think what is true is this. An assumption makes an ass of you and me when I stick to an assumption and I do not embrace curiosity. What does curiosity do? Curiosity allows me to move from what I thought was implied, which is my own perception of Bode at this meeting, to a place that is more explicit, where I am asking questions, I am learning more about Bode, I am trying to explore his perspectives, I am asking him about the things that he's saying, I'm interacting with him, I'm studying him, I'm seeing the information that is coming at me, and I'm gradually getting to a point where there is mutual understanding between Bode and I. That is an explicit space. I have moved from what was implied, which is just my own perspective, a place of assumptions, a place of first impressions, to a place of greater perspective. Now, that takes a journey. It takes time. So if we're all starting from the place of first impressions, it is very important that Bode thinks about what is the first impression that everyone on this call is going to have of me. And I need to find a way to convey that first impression, convey myself as a brand to the people that I'm interacting with, because that portrays a healthy identity that people can then work with, and we can move forward from there. Every single person successful in life thinks about that. They don't just show up every day without being intentional. You need to be the same. Think about your personal identity. We talk about understanding yourself enough to define an authentic approach through your values, your personality, your passions, your expertise to other people. But it starts with you looking in the mirror and saying, who am I? And then conveying yourself from there. In looking in the mirror, two things are very helpful. First, being honest with what you see in the mirror. And then second, there'll be things you see in the mirror you don't see in the mirror that you need more information about. Those things, other people see it every day. So make it a habit in interactions with your people, the people around you, to ask, what does it feel like living with me every day? Ask your son, what does it feel like, honestly, living with me as your dad every day? Ask your colleagues, what does it feel like working with me every day? Ask the people, ask your driver, what does it feel like driving me to work or driving me around every day? And allow them to be honest in their feedback to you, because you have to give them the permission to be that, particularly if you are in a hierarchically high position in leadership. You have to give permission to your son to be open and be honest with you. Not everything he will say will be stuff you like. There are blind spots that you need to then take on and think about, okay, what am I going to do with this? So it's important that we get feedback. Start with trusted people you know will not take advantage of it, but will be honest and objective. And then whatever it is they say, they will say some things that are really positive and it will encourage you to do more. They'll say some things that are not so positive, and you need to take that and say, okay, what am I going to do with this? How am I going to respond to this? I see time is fast gone, so I am conscious that we move forward. So, we've talked about ourselves. We cannot lead without other people. So, how much of an understanding of other people do we have? It's important that we think about that. I like a book. There's a book by a guy called John Ortberg. And the title always makes me laugh when I remember it. It says, everybody is normal until you get to know them. And that's the title of the book. It's a fantastic book about how we are so different. Everything seems abnormal, but there is an intention in God's mind for creating each one of us uniquely. So people are different, but they're actually predictably different. When we talk about profiling people, obviously the tool management drives is one that does that. DISC is another that does that. There are many tools out there that do that. I think management drives is a great one because it factors a lot of the nuances and the variations that arise in us being who we are, and it does not put us in a box. But I won't talk too much about management drives. If anybody's interested in management drives, let me know. I'll throw in my email address and my details at the end of the meeting, and we can go and explore what it's all about online, and we can talk about it a bit more. But generally speaking, the research around how we end up being the way we are in terms of our DNA has highlighted a number of areas. Heredity, things that we pick up from our parents, from our generations before us. Role models, people who influence us, particularly up until the age of 12. And our experiences, particularly after the age of 8, which those are experiences that actually shape who we become. But I thought it is very important to also highlight the fact that labels are for products, not people. So as we go through exploring any kind of profiling tool, the profiling tool is not telling you who you are. No. All it is doing, it is helping you to develop a vocabulary for understanding yourself and offering you a tool for better conversations around it. That's all. So it's making you a bit more intelligent about it. What makes you who you are is more, far more than just your profile. It includes your identity, your tendencies, your preferences, which are also impacted by the experiences that you've had and the choices you've made in life. It includes your ideologies. We've talked a lot about values, about beliefs this evening. It includes your injuries, the things that has had an impact on you, particularly those that we haven't allowed to heal. So they're still there. It also includes our influences. Like I mentioned earlier on, who are those people that we're allowing to be our guiding lights, to shape our thinking? We're constantly stopping. We're stopping to say, where is this particular perspective coming from? Why am I thinking this way about what I'm thinking, etc.? So all of those things have an impact on who we end up being. The DISC profile itself highlights 4 different kinds of individuals and then highlights areas of growth for each one. You're going to get the slide deck, so that will be very helpful for you to think through where your profile might be and where the profile of the people around you, the most important people around you, might also be. But in essence, there are 4. With management drives, it's much broader because this tends to want to keep us in the box, but you can find a variety of people in these 4 boxes as well. So you find a really strong bottom line organizer kind of person called a D. You find the I, somebody who's really engaging, encouraging, inspiring people. You find the S, somebody who's perceived as very stable, very structured, very loyal. And you find the C, somebody who is considered as very compliant, very aligned, very realistic, very aligned to process. What did we say we're going to do? That's what we must end up doing. I've taken a very, very simple way of trying to, it's a lot more complex, but the most important thing is you take time, find a tool that allows you to get to know yourself a bit more. That is the thing. If I was to ask you to guess, and you can throw your ideas into the chat box here, what this person might be in terms of the D, the I, the S, and the C. The D being somebody who is dominant and bottom line organizer, the I being somebody who is more of an inspirational kind of leader, the S being somebody who is more of a stable, steady kind of leader, and the C being somebody who's more of a compliant, let's do the process kind of leader. This is Mother Teresa when she was alive. What sort of profile would you think she had? You can throw that in the chat. We can discuss that a bit later. We also have Nelson Mandela while he was around. So he was around for many years and he played many different roles as a leader, different stages of his life. What kind of profile do you think he would have had? Is it different from Mother Teresa's? Perhaps so, maybe so. You also have Michael Jackson, who led in many contexts, in a different kind of context, particularly. What kind of person would you say he portrayed? as a person. And then you have our own president, former President Obasanjo, who's still kicking, even at his old age. Again, I know for some people, clearly they can see one of the four in him very, very clearly. I can see it, but we'll leave that for further conversation. But if you have any particular ideas about this, throw it in the chat box, and we can have that conversation when we have the Q&A. So each person has an overarching profile in terms of their personalities. One other thing that I would want to highlight as we begin to round up on our conversations here is going back into us as individuals. I mentioned earlier on that I will talk a bit about the brain and how it is wired, because I think it's really very helpful. We know about the concept of the iceberg. For any iceberg, what you see up on top of the water is probably only about 20% of the whole mass of what exists, which means that if you're going into it thinking this thing is small, think again, because what you have under the water is a huge thing. That was what happened to the Titanic, the biggest ship that ever was in the 1920s, that sank because it hit an iceberg somewhere in the North Sea. That imagery has been used to describe us in many ways. It can be used to describe me. What you see of me, what you know of me, is probably 10-20% of what I am, because there's so much that you do not know. Even if you stayed with me, lived with me 20-30 years, there's still a lot about me that you do not know, except I volunteer. And there will be things that I don't know about myself too. So you still will not fully know everything about me. So we use it in that perspective of being conscious of the fact that you need to get deeper to understand people. The same way you need to get deeper to understand yourself. But I want to use this concept to also think about how our brain works. Do you know that we actually have two minds? Our brain has two minds. We talk about it flippantly sometimes. We talk about our consciousness and our subconscious. Our consciousness processes very little data. Our consciousness processes data, particularly is interested in data that we can see, things that are going on immediately around us. And it needs to make sense of it very quickly, and helps us to make a decision. Then we have our subconscious. It's almost like a huge computer at the back. And that processes a lot of information. Now, the challenge is this. The subconscious processes a lot of information, but it determines, in the midst of the processing, it determines by a process of categorizing and determining what is irrelevant. It also determines what it brings to the forefront of our minds, which then becomes what we are focusing on. So it means that if there's a lot of helpful information at the back of my mind, in my subconscious, but I am not programming my brain to consider it important, my brain will leave it in my subconscious and it will not come into my consciousness. So there will be many things that I will see, many things that I will actually see and experience here, but I will not recognize it. I'll give you a very simple example. It's a very interesting example that happened to me years ago. I was driving our car. My wife was next to me. As we went along, I am you can't be if you're in the room with me now. I've got a lot of information around me, papers and everything, but it's all well structured. She is a very fluid kind of person, so we're very different in that regard. So we're driving. I'm driving, and I go, if you had no constraints, what sort of car would you drive? And she goes, oh, I love the bubble. I'm like, the bubble? And that's the VW, the old VW, the new type, very fancy, not much space to move around in, very cramped. It looks really nice on the outside, but you're thinking, how do you enjoy this on the inside? How would I, in my head, I'm thinking, who even chooses the bubble as the car that they want to drive if they had no constraints, no money constraints, no family constraints, nothing. This is just what you will enjoy. Why would you choose a bubble? So in my head, I'm thinking about that. She's still thinking about the bubble, and she goes, oh, actually, I'd love a purple bubble, which means that the color of that car, that bubble, will be purple. At that point, me in my structured mind, I'm going, now, of course, this is not a conversation. This is a conversation in my mind. I'm going, who even drives a purple car anyway? This is interesting. And I'm just processing it. Of course, I'm a wise husband, so I don't tell her what I'm thinking. I just continue driving. And I'm processing that thought for a while. Because I allowed the purple car, the thought of a purple car, and to come into my mind, and I processed it for long enough, I kid you not, for the next 2 weeks or more, I kept seeing purple cars all over the road. All of a sudden, I realized that many people were driving cars that were colored purple. I didn't even know before that there was one car on the road that was purple. Why did I get into that reality? Those cars were always there, but my brain put it at the back that this is irrelevant to body. But the moment I focused my mind on it, it became relevant for the brain to say, Body is focusing on purple. Let's show him what is relevant in the environment right now that is purple. And then I begin to see it. What does that mean for you? It means that what you focus on ultimately determines what is in your focus. What you are able to see is what you focus on. So that's how you program your mind to take things out of the subconscious and move it into your consciousness. That can be a very powerful, that's the gateway for you to begin to lead others effectively. Seth Godin talks about this, and he uses a very interesting quote, which I will mention. He says, people don't believe what you tell them. They rarely believe what you show them. They often believe what their friends tell them, but they always believe what they tell themselves. What are you telling yourself about yourself? What are you telling yourself about other people? What are you telling yourself about your leadership? What are you telling yourself is possible or not? I will hold back because I'm looking at the timings, and it's just about a minute or more. I'll move on from this. I won't show that video clip just because we are constrained with time. And I want to highlight one thing that is also important. We're now transitioning from I myself, and going into how I interact with the people around me. We talk a lot about emotional intelligence. But what is emotional intelligence? First is like being conscious of what my own emotions are, identifying them, and having the capacity to name them, recognize them, say, yes, this is how I'm honestly feeling. I'm feeling angry right now, or I'm feeling upset with this thing right now, or I'm feeling anxious, or I'm afraid right now. Well, it shouldn't end there. It's important that we recognize it. And then also being able to manage how I am feeling. My emotions don't control me. They are there to actually help me, but they are a tool I must deploy. I must use it to make myself effective as a person. The third is to then, in my interactions with other people, identify how they are feeling. What are the emotions that I am seeing? And there are many skills. It's something you keep developing. There are signs that you can look at. Some are universal, some are not. And so we usually analyze in cluster when we're thinking about what am I seeing? How is this person feeling? What are they thinking about what we're talking about right now, etc. And then knowing how to create a healthy relationship out of that perspective. I can't deny how I'm feeling or denigrate what is important to me, but I will not denigrate what is important to them as well. I'll create an environment. Think about the example I gave earlier on about the person working with me who raised their tone. I'm the CEO in the room, etc. I'm the CEO in the room, etc. And I decide not to clamp down on them. I have the power to do so, but I decide not to exercise my power in that regard, but rather to create a more wholesome environment that is not just about me, but about us and how we behave with each other in the context of our relationship. So we preserve both our own interest and the other person's interest. There's a lot of talk here around reframing. Again, I'm going to slow things down and when it comes to this, because I've said a lot about our beliefs. What we're thinking is very important. If we're thinking self-limiting beliefs, it is so important that we deal with them. And sometimes experiences can help us to realize we are thinking self-limiting beliefs. We tell ourselves that we can't do something, but we have not even tried. It's important for us to be conscious of what we're thinking and then to say, no, I will do it afraid. I will do it uncomfortable, but I will do it. And then we conquer that and we keep moving forward. So the sort of beliefs that we should focus on are beliefs and thoughts that empower us. That's why you have people talk about statements or affirmations that keep telling us who we are. Because again, don't forget, your mind focuses on what you tell it to focus on, and then it begins to see. You begin to see those things that were there all the while, but your mind was just not allowing you to see it because you didn't tell your mind, this is important to me. The mind is, your brain is actually at service to you, but you need to deploy it. That's one thing that neuroscience is helping us to understand. I've talked about us moving from the implicit to the explicit in reframing the context of our relationships, so I will not belabor that point. It's important for us to choose our behavior. Events happen, incidences happen, but what stands us out as a leader is the R that we choose. Do we choose to react to a situation, or do we choose to respond to the situation? When we react, we have no control over what we've done. When we respond, we've thought through what we're doing. We started with the end in mind, and we end up with an outcome. There are two O's. There's one that's negative, there's one that's positive. When we choose to respond, we end up with a positive outcome based on what we want. When we choose to react, or we just react, if we just react, we've made a choice. And the outcome is one that we have no control over. So it's important that we think about the fact that we do have more control than we think. It's just about self-management. Also, when we're thinking about that whole space of self-management, it's important that we think about when something is happening. Is this in my circle of control? This can save us a lot of stress. If it is not in my circle of control, okay, is it in my circle of influence? Something I don't have control over. I can't say this is it. It must happen this way. But I can shape, I can input into how it goes. I can share my own perspectives, and that might change minds. I can say a few things, and that might make people think a bit differently about things. So I can have some measure of influence over it. But then there are those areas that I don't have any control over, but I may be concerned about them. And I need to be clear. This area is an area of concern. This is, for me as a man of faith, that area is the area that I go to God and say, God, I'm concerned about this. And I go to him in prayer, and I need you to help me to find clarity concerning it. The areas of control, I also lay that before him, but I know that he's giving me responsibility to do something about it. Now, in executing that responsibility, I can ask for his help, but it's a different kind of ballgame. I know I am responsible for that. Areas of influence, again, I can go to him and say, God, help me to have influence. Give me some measure of influence in this area. Or why am I not having as much influence as I should in this area? And he can help me to do that. There are two activities that I wanted to highlight for us to do. Like Brother Mike mentioned earlier on, the activities are on the slides in the group. The first is the SWOT. What is a SWOT? It's a tool that just helps you bring disparate information into a frame that allows you to understand it better because it's all together. That's exactly what it is. Companies use it, product development people use it, industries use it, so do individuals. So use it to try and get a grasp on who are you as a person and what are your strengths, what are your limitations, what is the context you're operating in, and how can you bring your A game, or what is unique about you, to solve problems, to influence the environment, to have an impact in your immediate environment. I talk here about why the SWOT is important: minimizing strengths, highlighting, minimizing threats, highlighting strengths, helping you to make better decisions, and helping you to take proactive decisions. And I highlight a number of helpful questions on the slides. So you take time. It's not something you rush. Take time. If you don't have answers to some of these questions, ask the people around you, what are my weaknesses? And be honest, be humble about what it is they come with you with. Humility, honesty, and wisdom is what allows us to transition and transform ourselves. We are aware of something, we accept it, and then we choose to adapt where the need is required. The other slide also talks about the opportunities and the threats. Again, there are lots of questions in there that you can work through. Final thing I will say is around influence, because I talked earlier on about the circle of control, the circle of influence, and the circle of concern. In the circle of influence, there can be limitations to how much impact we have if we are not thoughtful about it. So influence is not something that just happens. Influence is not something that happens just because we have a position. There is a measure of influence that comes from that. Influence is not just something that happens because we have access to some information that other people don't have access to. There is a measure of influence that comes from that. But if we're going to have impact, huge impact, with the level of influence that we have, then we need to think about our character. What do people think about us? We need to think about credibility. Do people think that we are trustworthy? Do I have a trustworthy? And I don't have to take this and take it out to people. I can look at me and my daughter, me and my son, the level of influence I have on my daughter, on my 15-year-old daughter, who is hearing all sorts of things from everywhere outside, and they are more interesting to her than what she's been hearing in the household since she was growing up. because children are going through a season in their lives at that point in time. For me to be able to influence that young lady at 15 or 16, there must be a level of character that I have that is unquestionable with that person. There must be a level of credibility that I can trust dad, or I can trust mom. What she's saying, I can count on it. There must be a level of competence. People must believe that you're able to do stuff and really do it well, and so they trust you for that. But also there must be a level of connection that you have with them. That is not based on what they can do for you. It's just based on who they are as a person and how you value them. A John Maxwell quote captures this so well. It says that people don't care what you know until they know that you care. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. There are 3 points of connection that we all have with each other as human beings: the head, the heart, and the hands. If you go for the head first, give them information, you tell them what you know without connecting with their hearts, it's not going to have much impact. If you go for their hands, you force them to do stuff without connecting with their hearts, it's not going to have much momentum. But if you go for the heart first, I care about you. I'm interested in you as a person. Even if you don't do what I want, I have a heart for you as a person. Once you connect with the heart, the head and the hands, they follow. Because people say, oh, I can trust this person. I have a connection with them, a heart connection with them. Then the others naturally follow. So it's important that we have this as a weighting, as a barometer to assess our relationships with different people. And you can have all these 4 with one particular, in a particular context, and not have it in another. It's because you have not taken time to think about it and invest in these areas. So I like this because it's something I can actually take away and say, okay, what's my degree of, how do I portray character in this particular situation or with this particular person? How credible am I with this particular person? Every choice I make is either whittling down my character or strengthening it. Whittling down my credibility or strengthening it. Whittling down my competence or strengthening it. And whittling down my connection or strengthening it. And if I'm strengthening it, then my level of influence is high in those areas. And the day I'm calling on them to exercise that influence, I will see the results of all the investments that I have made in the past. I think that is the main thing I wanted to say. This slide, you have it in the exercise sheets. It helps you to begin to think about the whole idea of influencing people and bringing change around them. So, in conclusion, we've said a lot today. What would you say you're doing well? Note them. Be grateful for those things that you're doing well. What are those areas that you need to be thinking about to improve? Note them. Be thankful for where you are, but don't stay there. Remember what we said at the beginning. If you want to create a change, what is the motivation for excellence? It has to be from within you, because average is acceptable in many contexts that we are in. And then begin to think, what are the next things that I'm going to do? What am I going to keep? What am I going to develop? And what am I going to let go of? So that's a snapshot personal review that I would encourage each one of us to take. Any questions? Please let's feel free to share now, and any thoughts and comments, co-create this perspective. I hope this has been a useful talk, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I know we went a little bit beyond the time. I hope that I haven't blown the bank as well, but thank you so much for taking the time to listen.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Hode. That was loaded. That was quite loaded. Thank you very much. I don't know if we have any questions so far. I'm checking the chat box. Can't find any question in the chat box. Does anyone want to ask a question? Now is the time. Maybe you could raise up your hand. Okay, we have one from Ungo Alalibo. That's the first hand that is up. So Ungo Alalibo, you can please ask your question. Thank you. You can unmute.
Good evening, sir.
Question.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. This has been a very thorough and insightful listen and presentation. I appreciate your depth and your circumspection. Circumspection meaning that you have really considered all of the aspects of leadership. And I'm also happy that you started out with purpose, speaking about purpose. And so my question would really take the shape of, I'm also glad you talked about how all of your being stems from scripture, which is also very true in every sense. My question would be in the aspect of purpose in God, as well as our purpose in profession. How do we tie purpose in God with purpose in calling or profession?
Very, very. Thank you very much, and a very, very good question. I think the first thing to mention is that we really only have one life. It's a life in God, and out of that life in God, we flow into different perspectives in the world that He has called us to be in. So when I'm at work, my job is in service to Him. It is not PeopleSource is the organization that I run, for instance. So I'm not accountable to PeopleSource at the end of the day. God is the one I'm accountable to. So that's the first. I think that paradigm, because sometimes we look at it and we say, oh, there is the work separate, and then there is our journey with God is separate. It's one, which means that there needs to be congruence as we go into that. Now, when we then link it in with purpose in God and purpose at work, there is the scripture itself says it, that when you work, do it as unto God. So you find what you and I was also referring to a scripture earlier on that talked about how it is in Christ, or it is in Him, that we find what we're living for and who we are and what we're living for. So who we are and what we're living for is our purpose. Now, how that plays out in detail will vary from person to person. I might, for instance, find that my purpose is around thinking and helping people who are elderly in their last years feel that they are still valued here on earth. Maybe that's God took me down that road by working in a number of care homes and seeing people who society generally thinks, okay, this person cannot really do anything for us anymore, so let them just be in a care home, or let them just be in the house. Nobody's really paying them attention. We're busy doing life. And God just takes me on a journey where I encounter those individuals, and He puts it in my heart to have a burden for them. And so that becomes central to my purpose. And I'm constantly trying to create forums that makes people feel you're still valued. Until you go to be with God, you're still valued. That's something that seems fringe. But for me, God makes it a reality for me, and He puts in my DNA something that calls that thing. He also gives me giftings, callings that are aligned to that purpose. And so that becomes something that I find fulfillment in. I may find at some point in my life that I wasn't in that whole space. I came across that because the truth is we discover our purpose. God is the one who's created our purpose, but we discover it. So you don't know it from when you were born. The earlier you try and get to do some of the things that we're talking about today, the quicker you probably will get a sense. As you're asking the question, who am I? What's my purpose? What am I here for? And it's not just about, I want to be a lawyer because I just like the way lawyers look on telly. Or I want to be a doctor because I just like the respect that doctors have in society. Or I want to be a footballer because I'm skilled like Ronaldo. There's something more about this. And we have on my, it's one of the organizations that I'm involved with is called Love Talks. You probably can see that on the screen there. In Love Talks, we're focused on three things. And I'll share the handle in the chat after. We're focused on relationships. First, relationships with ourselves, then relationships with others, and then relationships with God. Relationship with ourselves, relationship with God, relationship with others. And in the relationship with God, we talk about what our purpose, how do we find our purpose? We have a program that helps people to go on that journey. But a lot of what we do on that program is around first understanding who you are, how God has wired you, and including your journey in life, your experiences, the things that burden you, etc. So you have like a map. You end up with like a route map of this is the journey so far. And then God begins to give you some clarity about the future. So you may find that you go through something like that and you're looking at where you are now at work, and there is no direct correlation in terms of this is the purpose in work and the purpose in God. And you then transition into the purpose in in God in that respect, and you are focusing wholly all your time on what you feel God has called you to do, and that gives you fulfillment. That's a possibility. But the reality as well is that that time that you had in work was a breeding ground for this time that you are now in a new season. What has happened is just that you have moved seasons. So you're still fulfilling what God wants for your life, but you've just moved from one assignment to another assignment in his purpose. It is not two different purposes. So I think that's probably an area that people sort of like struggle with. We look at the world, the marketplace, and say, there is the marketplace and there is the church. No, it's one. It's one. It's the whole world. God wants to save the whole world, and God wants to do a bit of that through you. So whether you are in church on Sunday or you're out there on the streets on Monday, God is the owner of everything. So I think that, I don't know if I've answered your question or if you just got me ticked up and going on a different tangent, but I hope.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. You really hit the nail on the head. However, I have a follow-up question. So I'll just ask my follow-up question, which you have already touched on, right? But you spoke about the purple bubble and how when we come into consciousness of something, we begin to see it everywhere. And I want to use that to tie into many people, especially Christians or in whatever religion we find ourselves, right? We get our, in quote, purple bubble from our spiritual leaders. We listen to our spiritual authority, and we get a lot of our belief systems from them. And in the Christian community which I belong to, I find out that there is this almost separation between the church and what I would call the social space or social organization or marketplace or whatever we call it. And so how does a believer, somebody who is trying to do God's will, how does he balance between breaking away from the purple bubble, or where we are more focused in the church, and then being effective in, just like you say, or marrying, let me use that word, marrying the church and basically what I'm asking about is balance. How does one come into balance, or resolve the conflict, as it were?
All right. Okay. Thank you. Just before you respond, we have just 4 minutes left. So just 4 minutes left. So as you respond, maybe you could at the same time just round up, just so that we in fact have 3 more minutes, so that at sharp 9 we will need to
leave. Yeah. I've sort of like answered about part of that question. It is one world. It is one life. God is interested in the world. The church is a place that God has and is dear to his heart, and it should be dear to every child of God. The church is a place that equips us. It's a place, it's a family. Think about it as a family. It's an environment that equips us to then transform the world. It is the world that needs transformation. It is the world that needs your attention more. What you have from church is equipping. So it is a paradigm shift that we need to have. It's important. And as we go in different seasons, we may find ourselves really feeling that we're in balance because we invest a lot in church and time and effort and stuff. But it must be that it is building us for a purpose. Staying in church for church itself is not the end goal. Being saved just to be saved is not the end goal. You are saved for a purpose, to reach out to those who are not and to impact the world around you, to showcase God's glory in the marketplace, to showcase God's glory in the world around us. So if we find ourselves constantly being in church 24/7, we need to stop and ask ourselves the question, who are we serving? Because the one who has called us, to serve him, is asking us to go and read the scriptures. It's asking us to go into the world and transform. Go into the world and change. Go into the world and I will give you words to speak. Go into the world and I will give you encounters that will transform the lives of people. We look at the experiences of those who are in scripture. That's what we see. Jesus came, engaged those people for quite a while, Paul, etc. Paul, not but the other, Peter, etc. Then he went, and then they went, and they went out. And that was how we have Christianity today. So that same mindset is still what should persist now. So that's where we find our balance, is by living out the scripture rather than saying this is the paradigm now. So I hope that's really helped. We can talk about that outside of this forum if you so desire. So I'm going to close out. Thank you so much. I'm going to share the links in the charts, and then we'll take it on from there.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Bode. Thank you very much. Okay. If you want to contact Mr. Bode, please, you can see his details are already in the chat box. And so you can probably shoot him an email or try to contact him, and I guess he can respond to you. Just before we close, we have 1 more minute. We will share the slides in the Aspire for Excellence Foundation WhatsApp group, okay? And you can also check www.lovetalks.tv if you want to also get some more information. So thank you very much, all of you, for coming tonight. It is 9 o'clock. And usually we will sign off around this time. Just before we sign off, could we please give a round of applause to our speaker? Please, if you could just help us do that, that will be appreciated. Thank you very much for making a difference in the lives of others, sir. God bless you. Thank you very much. You never really know the difference you make in the lives of others. And